The alerts light up like a Christmas tree and then flatten into a terrible calm. Nothing's failing. Nothing's crashing. But a new pattern slips through our dashboards. Background noise with a steady pulse. It's the sound of patient reconnaissance. It's the sound of someone who's already inside. In a war room like this, we tell ourselves we'll see the breach when it happens. In this case, we didn't. It began months earlier, in places we weren't watching closely enough. You know the brand? If you've touched a security program in the last decade, you've seen it on laptops. You've spotted the browser icon in the wild. You've fielded tickets and taught lunch and learns about it. A password manager is supposed to be the quietest part of the stack. The boring, reliable box that holds the keys to everything else. The breach we're covering today shattered that assumption. The target was LastPass. The prize was not one company's data or one customer's account. The prize was the vaults themselves, the encrypted backups of millions of people as secrets, and the metadata that helps attackers aim those secrets like a weapon. Hear the room tone with me for a second. Keyboard clicks, a faint fan hum, coffee going cold. Then the first realization, the adversary hasn't smashed the front door. They've followed the utility corridor, a developer's machine, a home network, a third-party app no one thought to interrogate that hard. That slim corridor led to a cloud backup environment. And from there to copies of customer vaults, encrypted but exfiltrated. That's when the dread sets in. You can kick them out of your network. You can rotate your keys. What you can't do is reel those backups back in. Today we're rebuilding that night not to sensationalize it, but to understand the mechanics, the decisions, the blast radius, and the recovery arc. We'll move briskly through the crisis as it unfolded, then slow down and pick apart the technical guts. How a third-party vulnerability on a personal machine became a corporate-scale breach. How zero knowledge still depends on human choices. And how a handful of defaults like iteration counts and unencrypted URLs turned into strategic disadvantages. We'll end with a forensic cooldown. What changed afterward, what didn't, and what defenders should do now to reduce the odds and the consequences of the next one. Password managers are paradoxes with a UI. Consolidate risk to reduce risk. Put everything that matters, passwords, API keys, seed phrases, Wi-Fi passcodes, internal links, into a single encrypted container and synchronize it everywhere. The more we digitize, the more this model makes sense. The only thing standing between a vault and an adversary are math and habits. A strong master password, a key derivation function that makes guessing that password expensive, and client-side encryption that keeps the vendor blind. LastPass built its brand on that promise. Client-side encryption with a zero-knowledge design. Your master password. Never leaves your devices, and PBKDF2-based key stretching to make brute forcing hard. But the devil is in defaults. For years, many customers ran with iteration counts that were once good enough and later became dangerously low. And for performance and product reasons dating back to 2008-era hardware, URL fields and vault entries weren't encrypted, which meant that if an adversary ever stole a vault backup, they would know which sites you used, even if they couldn't open the secrets inside without cracking your master password. Those design decisions weren't malevolent. They were choices made under old constraints. Then 2022 forced a re-reckoning. Scale amplifies everything. LastPass wasn't a niche tool for a handful of users. It served millions of people and over 100,000 organizations, household names and one-person consultancies alike. When a platform like that is compromised, the downstream risk isn't a tidy list of affected customers. It's the sum of every website those customers log into, every SaaS admin panel, every crypto wallet seed stored in a note, every personal account that might be used for recovery on a corporate one. The breach matters because a vault isn't just a password file. It's a map of your attack surface. LastPass's own communications would later stress that cryptography held. Encrypted vault data remains encrypted, unless the attacker can guess or derive the master password. That's true, and also incomplete as a risk statement. The compromise moved risk out of the vendor's environment and into the world, where time and compute pressure grind against human behavior. If your master password is strong and your iteration count is high, you're still playing defense, but with better odds. If not, your secrets are sitting in an adversary's queue, waiting their turn on a GPU farm. That is the gravity of this incident. It pushed millions of risk decisions from maybe someday to right now. It starts in late summer 2022. In August, an attacker compromises a LastPass developer's corporate laptop and uses it to access a cloud-based development environment. This is not the production environment where customer vaults live. It's a staging ground for code and internal tooling. Source code and internal technical information are stolen. The company rebuilds the development environment, rotates credentials and certificates, and declares the first incident contained. At this point, most of the world shrugs. Scary headline. But no customer data was accessed. We've all read that line before. Autumn turns to winter, and the other shoe drops. On November 30th, 2022, LastPass discloses that information stolen in August was used to target a separate environment, a third-party cloud storage service that housed backups of production data, including customer vault backups and metadata. The attacker, they explain, wasn't a smash-and-grab opportunist. They had pivoted from stolen developer intel to a DevOps engineer who held the keys that mattered. What followed was a stealthy intrusion into backup storage, long enough to inventory and exfiltrate multiple snapshots of user vaults and associated records. The company will later confirm that sensitive vault contents were encrypted, but URLs and some metadata were not. The difference between encrypted and exfiltrated becomes the center of the story. In early March 2023, after forensic work with partners, LastPass publishes the narrative in more detail. The adversary didn't win by breaking the math in the vault encryption. They won by compromising the home computer of a senior DevOps engineer, one of a handful with access to the corporate vault that, in turn, contained secrets enabling access to cloud backups. The entry point: vulnerable third-party software on that home machine, exploited to deliver malware and a keylogger, which captured the engineer's master password. With that, the attacker accessed shared vault folders holding cloud credentials and ultimately reached the backups. This is patient, layered tradecraft. It's also painfully human. From there, the narrative splits into two tracks: containment and consequences. Internally, the company rotates secrets, hardens cloud configurations, and rebuilds trust in access paths. Publicly, customers receive escalating guidance. Check the strength of your master password, raise PBKDF2 iteration counts, enable MFA, review vault contents. For business tenants, there are additional bulletins about federated auth and backup MFA seeds in the stolen database. The note that stings: the MFA Federation database copy was encrypted, but the separate decryption key for that database was among the secrets the adversary stole. A lot of people read that line twice. The months after disclosure bring the longer echo. Blockchain sleuths and incident responders start correlating clusters of cryptocurrency thefts to owners who stored seed phrases or keys in Password Manager, notes many of them LastPass users. On certain days, millions of dollars drain out in coordinated bursts. It's not proof that vaults were cracked at scale, but it is strong circumstantial evidence that some were, and that the attackers prioritized targets with high-value on-chain assets. As investigations continue into 2024 and 2025, law enforcement filings link major cryptocurrency heists back to vaults believed to have been cracked post-breach. The clock that started in late 2022 is still ticking. Let's strip the drama and keep the mechanics. The adversary's path is a chain of 4 key moves. First, steal context from a development environment, source code and internal documentation that function like reconnaissance. Second, use that context to target a privileged human, the DevOps engineer, outside the protections of a fully managed corporate endpoint. Third, land malware on that personal machine via a known vulnerable third-party application, then capture the master password with a keylogger. Fourth, leverage the captured master password to unlock a corporate vault with cloud secrets, pivot into a cloud backup store, and exfiltrate encrypted customer vaults and associated metadata. The adversary doesn't need to break AES. They need to win at context, persistence, and privilege. That third-party application? Reporting and advisories pointed to Plex Media Server and a Windows-specific deserialization flaw that allowed code execution under certain conditions. For a home lab, Plex is as common as a router. For an attacker, it's a beachhead with decent plausible deniability. CISA later added the relevant Plex CVE to its known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, underscoring that this wasn't a hypothetical hole. It was being abused in the wild. This is the quiet lesson. Home computers of highly privileged employees are part of your attack surface, whether or not your policy says so. Once the keylogger captured the DevOps engineer's master password, the rest of the pathway was depressingly straightforward. Corporate vaults often contain the crown jewels, AWS access details, S3 bucket naming conventions, integration secrets, and static credentials that unlock backup systems and build pipelines. In LastPass's own postmortem, the attacker reached cloud backup storage that held configuration data, API secrets, third-party integration secrets, and backups of all customer vault data. Those backups included encrypted vault blobs and unencrypted items like URL fields and some file paths. Encrypting sensitive content is essential, but the metadata is powerful too. It lets attackers triage which targets to prioritize if and when they can crack a master password. So what about the vaults themselves? How hard are they to crack? LastPass vaults are encrypted client-side with AES-256 and keys derived from the master password via the immediate blast radius is the company's trust with its user base. Security teams who spent years selling password managers, as a best practice, now had to write memos explaining why this one was different and why the model still made sense. Journalism and security forums lit up with calls to migrate away, citing both the severity of the incident and the cadence of communication. Even advocates of password managers in general, people like us, had to grapple with optics. If a password manager can be breached and vault backups stolen, what do we tell our users? The answer had to be both candid and actionable. Migrate if you must. Either way, change the behaviors that made you vulnerable. Then came the long tail that kept proving the risk wasn't theoretical. Starting in 2023, on-chain analysts and wallet vendors began correlating waves of cryptocurrency theft with victims who stored seed phrases or private keys in password manager notes. One cluster in October 2023 alone saw roughly $4.4 million siphoned from more than 24 victims. Across 2024, additional extractions stacked up millions more. By 2025, federal filings explicitly linked a 9-figure crypto heist to vault data, believed to have come from the 2022 LastPass incidents. Each of these events landed like aftershocks, reminding everyone that when backups are taken, attackers can work at their own pace. For enterprises, the fallout was both operational and cultural. Operationally, there was a scramble to audit vault contents and, where possible, invalidate secrets that might have been stored in personal vaults linked to corporate identities. Culturally, there was a reevaluation of BYOD assumptions. A lot of teams discovered that highly privileged engineers were working on personal rigs with hobbyist software that never crossed an enterprise vulnerability scanner. This wasn't hypocrisy, it was inertia. The breach forced hard conversations about corporate control of endpoints for staff, with access to the keys to the kingdom. Vendors, too, absorbed the shock. LastPass shipped a set of changes in the wake of the incident, including raising PBKDF2 iteration minimums, adopting AES GCM 256, encrypting URLs, strengthening endpoint protections, and hardening cloud posture. You can argue those moves should have been earlier. You can also acknowledge that post-breach, they were the right moves to reduce the risk that metadata and weak defaults would be force multipliers again. Other password managers seized the moment to tout memory hard key derivation like Argon 2 and to auto-migrate iteration counts, pressing the market toward safer defaults. Perhaps the most sobering impact is psychological. Zero knowledge remains sound cryptographic architecture, but it isn't an amulet. Users learned the difference between a vendor not knowing your master password and an attacker possessing an encrypted copy of your vault. One is a privacy shield. The other is a race you can lose if your inputs are weak. The story changed the way people think about secrets at rest. Seed phrases donned to belong in general-purpose password vaults. They belong in cold storage or specialized key managers. Admin credentials that can't be rotated quickly shouldn't live in user-managed notes. Rotation plans shouldn't be theoretical documents. They should be rehearsed, with muscle memory for days when you must rekey dozens of services. Fast. The breach did not kill password managers. It made them grow up. There's also the wider market effect. Regulators and insurers were already watching identity controls and third-party risk. An incident where a home computer, a consumer media app, and cloud backups combined to produce a global threat vector ticked every box. Expect more due diligence on vendors' endpoint policies for administrators, more questions about how key material is split and stored, and more pressure on enterprises to prove that critical access is only possible from managed, monitored, and patched devices. The line between employee and home user is not a line at all. It's a spectrum of risk that needs policy, tooling, and enforcement. The first trend line is inevitable: safer defaults. Post-incident, LastPass increased minimum PBKDF2 iterations to 600,000 for updated and new accounts, and competing managers doubled down on memory-hard KDFs. Whether you prefer PBKDF2 with very high iterations or Argon 2 with sane parameters, the lesson is that the default needs to be hostile to GPUs, and vendors need to auto-migrate legacy accounts. Don't ask users to become crypto parameter experts. Make the best choice for them, and make it the path of least resistance. The second trend is metadata minimization. Encrypt what you use to expose. LastPass's 2024 URL encryption rollout is part of a broader movement. Stop leaking targeting signals. If the attacker steals an encrypted vault, the only thing they should learn for free is that you use a password manager. Everything else should be opaque. Expect vendors to assess other affordances that trade privacy for convenience and to tighten them up. Today's devices can handle more decryption than the phones of 2012. We should design like it. Third, admin hygiene for the cloud era. Privileged access should be boring and locked down. If your senior DevOps engineers can access corporate vaults from personal machines, you don't have a last line of defense, you have a single point of friendly failure. The future will lean harder into hardware-backed keys for privileged operations, signed binaries, posture-aware access, device health, agent status, patch levels, and segmentation that keeps backup credentials out of interactive reach. Combine that with continuous monitoring that treats home as an extension of the office network in threat modeling, even when it isn't in policy. Fourth, secret sprawl management. Password managers excel at human-type secrets, but we've stuffed them with copies of everything: cloud access keys, CI/CD tokens, and blockchain seed phrases. The future splits these concerns. Human logins stay in managers. Machine credentials move to purpose-built secret stores with rotation, limited lifetimes, and audited access. Keys for wallets and signers live in hardware or specialized custody, not in a general-purpose vault. This isn't purity. It's compartmentalization, the same principle we use in network design applied to secrets. Finally, user education that doesn't condescend. We need to teach the subtlety of encrypted but exfiltrated. We need to stop promising that any single layer will save you. We need to normalize master passphrases that feel like sentences, with entropy driven by length and randomness, not obscure character classes. And we need to keep telling people this truth: a password manager remains one of the best defenses for everyday security, provided the vendor S defaults are modern and your own choices are strong. Take a breath and step back with me. The LastPass breach is not a story about broken cryptography. It is a story about pathways. How a single unpatched third-party application on a home computer became the entry point to a corporate vault, and how that vault held the keys that unlocked cloud backups of encrypted customer data. It's a story about how metadata, URLs, file paths, configuration notes carries risk, and how defaults, iteration counts set long ago, can quietly become liabilities. It's a story about blast radius, not just for one company, but for millions of people whose secrets were moved from safe in a vendor and NES architecture to challenged by an adversary S persistence. If you are listening with an engineer's ears, hear the architectural lessons. Treat your administrator's home environments as high-value targets. Enforce managed endpoints for privileged access. Keep your most dangerous secrets out of spaces where you can't rotate or expire them quickly. If a vendor tells you a backup of sensitive data exists, ask how it's protected and who can reach it, and insist that the answers be automated, not aspirational. If you're listening with a user's ears, hear the operational call. Make your master passphrase long and unique. Check and raise your iteration count. Turn on MFA, but don't assume it eliminates the risk of a stolen encrypted vault. Audit your vault for things that don't belong there. Seed phrases, static credentials that can't be changed easily. Move them to safer systems, or harden their storage with hardware. And if you're listening with a leader's ears, hear the governance challenge. Fund the boring work. Pay for the managed laptops. Give security the authority to say no to convenience at the edges where it matters most. Incentivize vendors to ship safer defaults and to minimize metadata. And build and practice rotation plans as if you already know that someday you will need them. The night our dashboards went quiet and the attacker kept moving is not a failure we bury. It's a lesson we carry forward. Tools can be good. Habits have to be better. We can use password managers without pretending they're magic. We can protect our organizations without pretending home networks are off the board. And we can tell the truth about the risk. Encryption is a wall. Human choices are the gate. Keep both strong. That's our debrief. Patch what you can patch. Rotate what you can rotate. And if you've been putting off the hardening work because it felt optional, consider this your nudge to treat encrypted but exfiltrated as a first-class threat model. Today, while the coffee's still warm,